Hey guys, Zomfox here, and I'm back from my vacation. Thank you all for the best wishes and all that, and allowing me to actually enjoy it. Because, of course, when I went on vacation, we had huge news drop regarding the merger. We now know all but guaranteed what teams are in this league, as well as how the dispersal draft is going to work, or should I say dispersal drafts. We also have some other information, and we have potentially the next head coach of the Memphis Showboats being announced as well. So without further ado, let's just get right into it with all the new details regarding the USFL and XFL merger. So the first thing to note is what teams are in and what teams are out. Well, the 8 teams that are in are the teams that we actually heard from that report that was considered quote unquote wrong. The Stallions, Showboats, Gamblers, and Panthers survive in the USFL. The Renegades, Defenders, Brahmas, and Battlehawks survive in the XFL. There is a catch to one of those teams, though, which is what we'll talk about in a second. The teams that are out does mean that the Stars, Generals, and the Maulers and Breakers are out in the USFL, and the Roughnecks, Sea Dragons, Vipers, and Guardians are out in the XFL. Naturally, the main teams being the Dragons, Guardians, Breakers, and Maulers being out are the biggest deals because it's just a lot of people were really hoping those teams would survive, whether because of their great fan bases or how dominant the teams are, or the fact that it's going to have a huge impact. No West Coast team with Seattle being gone, no Florida team with the Guardians being gone. But why are the Roughnecks being out not a big deal when I just did a video talking about how most people wanted them to stay? Well, that's because technically they're not really out yet. You see, the benefit to having a PA is that you pretty much are able to force the hand of the league sometimes. And that's what the USFL PA probably was able to do in this situation. Now, yes, the reports were a 50-50 merger, but it's pretty safe to say that there was probably a good chance that the USFL PA had a huge reason for what this might happen. Mark Thompson had said on Twitter Speak that the Gamblers players or the Gamblers team may be rebranded to the Roughnecks. Now, you may be wondering what that means. Essentially, doing this will create 4 USFL and 4 XFL teams, meaning it'll keep USFL players in the USFL division, which we'll get to in a second. But you'll be keeping the Roughnecks name and brand. Apparently, a stadium deal has been worked out. It appears, as people have been saying on, Pro Football Newsroom. So essentially, what's going to be is all the Gamblers players, coaching staff, and all that will be basically rebranding from the Gamblers to the Roughnecks. So it's not the same Roughnecks team we saw in the XFL. It's going to be the Gamblers, but the Gamblers are going to be the Roughnecks. Really weird. I'm not fully sure if I agree with how they're doing this, but I guess it makes sense to keep 50-50 on the players, and teams for each league. Just kind of weird, but that's kind of what it's looking like it might be. Granted, that's not confirmed yet. We don't know for sure, but there's a chance that the Gamblers might rebrand to the Roughnecks. And that leads us to the humongous email we had gotten from 2 XFL players. I don't remember who, I don't think anyone knows who leaked this. Some people say that not everything in this is fully true yet. We don't know for sure, but this is pretty much what we've heard is that the new league will be officially created early January, is what it will happen. As nothing is official announcement, these are all things that PAs or XFL staff have mentioned to people, and that the new league will have 2 conferences in an XFL and USFL conference. I personally like this. I do understand the sentiment of if you're trying to merge to save cost, why aren't you doing a North and South? Which I do agree with that. But I've said that you need to keep the USFL and XFL branding. They're both too powerful of branding to just get rid of them. And that, sadly, we will still be seeing hubs in this league. Now, it's not the USFL hub, so don't worry. All these teams are going to be playing in their home stadium. But we are seeing the XFL hub model, which if you've seen what some people on the Stallions have said, mainly Scooby, they're not a fan of this. As I've said before, people don't realize it enough. The XFL hub model itself was a bad hub model as well because you don't actually have the community engagement the same way as teams like the Stallions, Showboats, and Panthers did. So going back to only having really the Renegades as a home team is going to be pretty lackluster, but at least all the teams will be playing in their home stadium. Now, training camp date is going to be reportedly February 23rd, and they're going to be getting a $400 housing stipend. I'll get more into the money and what they're getting and how it's pretty much just the USFL CBA. But now we're going to look at the draft information. We're going to look at the XFLs first. So players on dissolved XFL teams will not be able to be released to go to a USFL team. Why? Because prior to the 27th, XFL teams that are in the conference will protect 42 players up to on their roster. they will release the main remaining players on their roster, and they will be considered unprotected. Then in the mini dispersal draft, the 4 XFL teams will be able to select 10 players max to add to their roster from dissolved teams only. Naturally, there's going to have to be something for if, teams are different and all that. There's going to have to be some sort of situation for it. And then the rest of those players will also become available for the Super Dispersal Draft, which will be happening in January, where both XFL and USFL will have a dispersal draft consisting of the players from the dissolved teams and players who are released that are unprotected. And that will draft 23 players to complete their training camp roster. You do not need to do anything to be considered for the mini dispersal super draft. Whoever sent this email will do that. Essentially, it's a way to keep the best players from the XFL in the XFL conference and the USFL to the USFL. Because its XFL analysis put it the easiest way to understand it is that each surviving team can protect up to 42 players that are under contract before the dispersal draft. Each surviving team will claim up to 20 players that are not making the merger before the dispersal draft. And then all non-protected players will be entered in the dispersal draft for all 8 teams. So very similar, but not the exact same in the USFL side. So, and this was pretty much said by the USFLPA to the players. So this is pretty much how it is. If you don't follow XFL analysis on Instagram, I would go recommend doing it. Great. A lot of easy info to get. So essentially, it's a change that I actually really do like. You're keeping the best players from both leagues in both leagues, which I think is a really cool thing because that we can actually see some of those like wish matchups we had, like, oh, who would win, the Stallions or the Defenders? Or who would win, between the Houston teams, even though we're not going to see it, but we'll see, the Roughnecks/Gamblers go against the Renegades in a battle of the Texas teams or something like that. I think it's a really cool thing that they're doing this. It's going to keep the best players in both leagues. And I'm going to be really interested to see where some of these big names go, especially someone like Case Cookus, who's going to be fully available now. I'm naturally hoping the Panthers get him, but we'll see what happens with him. So now going into the pay, it's very evident that the pay is going to be the USFL. It's going to be the USFL CBA. Now, in that announcement, we didn't see the technicalities like the 150 weekly 401k or the 5,000 chip bonus. When you look at the pay compared to 2023, and when you see something that Boogie Roberts tweeted, which is everyone will be under the CBA that's currently being negotiated, please stop the cap. I would assume that's where the what Mark Thompson said was not everything was true in that email is regards to pay, because the CBA is being negotiated as we speak. So there is a good chance that we actually see these numbers for player pay be increased or just changed somewhat. Naturally, this is an overall benefit for XFL players. As we talked about before, XFL players only benefited in their contract if they were to win and win a lot. Because aside from that, the USFL was just a much more stable contract, as well as the benefits you had were just a ton. And that's pretty much where the difference lies, is that the USFL CBA, well, the USFL having a PA has proven over the past year to be the right decision. And I think that a lot of XFL players are starting to regret that, as it's feeling more like the USFL side of the players have the edge in this merger. Now, the last bit of information is regarding the head coach of the Memphis Showboats. It is not official, but United Football Media has stated that John DeFilippo is in line to become the next Showboats head coach. Now, the other option is Mike Riley. As I said before, with them keeping the USFL on the USFL side and XFL on the XFL side, one of the two best coaches that are now available is going to potentially be going to the Showboats. Now, I wonder what this means for Bart Andrus. He looked insanely good in year one, but this past season with there having no offensive line, the Stars weren't great. I don't know if he's going to be out of football coaching or if he might go to a team to be an OC or something. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see that. But I honestly like John DeFilippo over Mike Riley here. And the reason I say that is because I feel like DeFilippo can add a lot more Breakers players to make the Showboats better than Riley can with Generals players. I don't know why I feel that way, but I feel like when you look at DeFilippo and what he did with the Breakers, he took a team that was already like the third best team, arguably second best team that year in 22 with Fedora, and made them better in 2023. Now, yes, MBT is gone, but if DeFilippo is able to bring in Wes Hills, he is able to bring in Shad. You can pair Shad with Atkins and have arguably the best DT duo in the entire league. And then you've got far other players, Vontae Diggs, and other guys that I can't remember off the top of my head. you can make a really dominant team here. Now, yes, Mike Riley can do very similar things. He could bring in Toby Johnson. He could bring in Darius Victor. But I feel like DeFilippo would be a great fit for this Breakers team. And this would be a huge ad for the Showboats and would immediately put them in a legit title contention area. But we'll see. So overall, this is all we've heard so far regarding the USFL and XFL merger. We're probably not going to hear any more info regarding this, aside from maybe a leak here or there, until early January, as we've seen. But it's going to be interesting to see how the dispersal drafts work, how anything like that comes about. Interesting to see if DeFilippo does get the Showboats job and all that. So if you're not already, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. You'll be notified as soon as I upload any videos regarding the merger or anything else. I have a couple of videos planned to come out in the next couple weeks that aren't just, merger stuff. And I'll see if you guys like those kind of videos, and we'll see. As always, guys, have a great night.